Hello everyone once again, and thank you for joining us for this Hecterra webinar. Today we are presenting the new Wialon-based application Hecterra that was released last week. And just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box in your Zoom control panel. We will have time for all your questions at the end of the webinar. Once again, please disable the microphones and disable the video. If you can't hear me well, please let me know in the chat window. Hecterra is a new Wialon-based application designed for agricultural cultivation area counting and can also be used for your own developments in accordance with your customers' requirements. After analyzing the needs expressed by our partners, we decided to focus on the basic universal tasks of all agribusinesses. So these basic tasks are, the first one is information about fields and crops. The second one is the volume of cultivations. And the third one is special implements and drivers control. So let's go to the application interface. Speaking about the application, I should mention that it includes two main components. The first one is the basic interface in which the above named tasks are performed. And the second component is the API. So we have the ability to integrate the application with the third-party solutions. In Hecterra, we focused on this possibility, understanding the diversity of the specific requirements for the application of different agribusinesses. Some of these requirements may not be covered with the universal solution, and that's why working with the application API is described in the documentation that is available from the user menu. And you can switch also to the developer mode if you need to display the application elements, IDs, and make working with the app API faster and more convenient. So if you use this mode, you will see the IDs of all the elements in the application. So let's disable this function. We don't need it right now. Okay. So today we are going to speak about the application interface, what preparatory settings need to be done in Wialon and in Hecterra, and what results can be obtained. And let's start with the result. So the result of working in the application will be a report that can be built on a unit, on an individual unit, like this. It can be built on a field, so you select the field. It can be built on a particular driver, like this, or it can be built on a technological operation. And you see all the fields where this operation took place. So the columns in the report can be enabled or disabled according to your needs. You can sort the information according to any criteria from any column of the report, or you can also export the report to the CSV file if needed. So each of the cultivations that is shown in this report is clickable. So in the window that opens, you can see the field, the tracks of movements in the field, the cultivations. They are based on the width of the implement. You can see the overlaps, the omissions, and the volume of the fuel spent on this cultivation and some other information. We will talk about the cultivation's characteristics a bit later to know what information is described. So what was supposed to be done in order to receive the information in the report? So some preparatory work is to be done in the Wialon interface. So I will switch to the Wialon interface. And first of all, you need to make sure that the units in Wialon are configured correctly. Please switch off your microphones. Thank you. Okay. So first of all, we need to make sure that the units in Wialon are configured correctly, and these units send messages to our server. We recommend that the messages from the units arrive with the frequency sufficiently high for building a detailed track. For example, we can check it in the tracks panel. So, and we see that this track is rather detailed and the messages frequency is rather high. The accuracy of the coordinates is very important when registering the cultivations. So you see that this unit track is rather accurate, and we will be able to see what cultivations can be registered based on this track and based on the implements widths a little bit later. So next, you need to create drivers and trailers in Wialon. So if we go to the drivers tab, we see that we have a list of drivers that are assigned to the units. And if we go to the trailers tab, we see that we have a list of trailers that are also assigned to the units. So the trailers will be used in Hecterra as implements. Please pay your attention that these elements are to be created in the same resource where you will work in Hecterra. These elements are not a must, and a cultivation can be registered without drivers and without trailers in general. And in this case, for each cultivation, you will have to to put the technological operation and the width of the cultivation will be selected manually. So generally speaking, the drivers and the trailers will save your time, and you will not have to perform this work manually. So after you create all the necessary elements in Wialon, once again, these are the units, the drivers, and the trailers. We can go back to Hecterra and continue working there. To log into the application, it is necessary that the user has access to at least one resource. If the user has access to several resources, so he will need to select the resource he will work in before starting working with the application. So the resource you select here will be used for taking the drivers from this resource, taking the trailers for implements, and geofences for fields. And the cultivations will be registered in this resource you select in the user settings. You can also select the language in the user settings, the date format, and activate the developer mode. Another important setting here is the possibility of adding map layers. So we have a special button for adding some additional map layers. So this process is described in the documentation and on the forum. And an example of adding a layer is also given in the forum. So we have added an additional map layer. And if we go to the Fields tab right now, you will see that we can switch to another map layer. That the last one is the one we added manually to the user settings using this layer address and this layer parameters. So if you have any custom layer you would like to use, you will be able to add this layer in the user properties, and you will be able to activate it and to see your fields on this layer you select. So now we are here viewing the fields we have. And we can proceed to creating the fields for the application. So there are three methods for creating the fields. The fields can be created the fields can be created directly in the application. This method is the most time-consuming, and knowing this, we have implemented. I'm sorry. Okay, we have another methods for creating the fields. So the fields can be imported from the files. If you have your fields in some KML or shape files, you can import these fields using the import option. And the fields can be synchronized with Wialon. Please pay your attention that only the geofences polygons can be synchronized with Wialon. And regardless of the origin of the field, you can manually add areas of the uncultivated area to any field. That means that we can add some area that will not be included into the field, and when calculating the cultivation, this area will not be taken into account. The maximum size of the field in Hecterra created with any method is 1,000 hectares. You can synchronize all geofence polygons created in the resource or geofences from certain groups. Let's see how it works. When you choose the option for synchronizing the fields and the geofence, you see that you can add the geofence you have in your resource, or you can add the geofences from particular groups if you have these groups created in the Wialon main interface. So you can select one of the groups or several groups. If there are geofence polygons in Wialon that are not present in Hecterra, then these geofences are transferred to the applications. If since the last synchronization, the properties of the geofence were changed, such properties as name, description, or form, then these changes will be added to Hecterra, and the properties will be updated for the fields that are already here. Please note that geofences with any kind of self-intersections cannot be transferred to the application, and the synchronization will not be possible in this case. So what else? When hovering the mouse on the field on the map, you will see a pop-up with the name of the field, its area, with the description, if any, and the name of the current crop growing on the field if it is indicated in the crop rotation. Additionally, the field is highlighted by the color of the culture, and when you click on the field, it is also highlighted in red in the list of fields on the left. And it makes finding the fields easier if you want to modify the field's properties, for example. So you see that field number 5 is highlighted in red when I click on the field. So we have the list of the fields created. We know 3 methods for creating the fields. And now we can go to the next tab, to the crops. So we need to create a list of crops that grow on our fields. For each culture, we can set the name and the color. The color will be used if crop rotation is indicated for the field and the crop that is currently growing on it is known. In this case, the field is painted on the map, and if for the period for which the work is registered, the crop rotation is indicated, then the information about the culture is also used during registration for work in the field. So we have a list of the cultures of the crops that grow on our fields, and now we need to go back to the Fields tab, and we have to match the crops and the fields. And we can indicate when and where certain types of crops grew and what is currently growing on the fields. So if we open any field properties, we can go to the crop rotation tab, and we see that the crop rotation for each field is indicated individually. We see that in the field properties, we can specify the crops for different periods, starting from the year 2000. So thus we can have the history of all the crops growing on this field. We can set the dates of sowing and harvesting for the past period. If the crop is still growing, like in the example we are viewing right now, we do not indicate the harvesting date, and in this case the crop is considered as currently growing, and the field will be colored with the color of this crop on the map. For winter crops, in the section season, we indicate the year of harvesting, not the year of sowing. And in general, the benefit of introducing the information about the crop rotation is that when you are looking for cultivations, the information about the crop will be received automatically for the fields with the indicated crop rotation, if the growing period coincides with the cultivation period. Otherwise, you will be able to indicate the crop for each cultivation manually. Okay, now we can go to the next step, and the next step is creating the list of operations. So the operations or technological operations includes the list of types of work performed in a field. So on this page, we create a list of technological operations that are usually performed in your fields. We enter the name of the application, of the operation, sorry, and please don't skip this step. it is important because the operations are useful in the further stages of your work in Hecterra. The same when registering a cultivation. You will see these operations, and the cultivation area will also be calculated based on this information. So the next tab is the implements tab. So the list of implements is formed automatically from the trailers available in your resource in Wialon. So we don't have the option for creating the implements right here, because the implements you see here are the trailers. So if you need to create a trailer or an implement, if you need to edit it or assign it to a unit, you need to go to a Wialon account and to do it there. If the implements page is empty, it means that there are no trailers in your resource, or the user doesn't have access to any trailers. In this case, you should create them in Wialon or give access to the trailers that are already created in some resource, in the resource where you're working in Hecterra. So adding and deleting the implements as well as renaming them is possible only in Wialon. So the information about binding a trailer to a unit is also taken from Wialon. Right now you can see that all the trailers are assigned to the units. The Hecterra application will receive this binding information from Wialon. The synchronization of the list is done automatically every time a user logs into Hecterra. So that is why it is necessary to log into the system again after adding or changing trailers in Wialon, or you can just refresh the Hecterra page. So let's see the characteristics of the implements in Hecterra. These characteristics include working widths in meters, and we set the operation type. We selected from the operations list created on a previous step. So these operations we created here will be used for the implements. So the cultivation area is calculated based on the unit track and the implements widths. That is why it is important to indicate the correct widths and the correct operation. The system can work without implements, in this case, you need to perform a lot of adjustments manually, because when registering a cultivation, you will need to set the technological operation and the working widths manually, and it will not be efficient. So we recommend using the operations and the implements for registering your cultivations. So, and another mode that is not seen here, another tab that is not available on the bar, but we will see these elements, is the drivers. So the driver's name is mentioned while searching for potential cultivations. Let's see. When searching a cultivation, okay, we will see the driver's name, and we will see the driver's name also in the final report. So in order for the system to detect drivers automatically, make sure that there are drivers in your resource. They have bindings, either manual or automatic. While the first condition is a must, So the drivers must exist in your resource. The second condition, the bindings, is optional. The same, we recommend using the automatical binding because it will help to reduce the amount of manual work. So if drivers have no bindings or their bindings do not coincide with the intervals of cultivations, you can specify a driver for each cultivation manually. So creating new drivers, deleting them, renaming them, binding them to the units is possible only in Wialon. So we go back to the Wialon interface, and we see that the driver's properties can be modified here. The drivers can be assigned or reassigned, or they can be changed in the Wialon interface. So the synchronization happens automatically when the user logs into Hecterra. So again, after changing some drivers properties, you need to refresh the page of the Hecterra application. How to check whether you have drivers if there are no drivers list on the application? So the simplest way is to go to the Reports tab and select the report type by driver, and after that you will see the list of all the drivers that are available for this resource and the drivers you have access to. Okay, so another important moment to pay your attention to is that we also need units. So in Hecterra, units are tractors, combines, or other agricultural machinery that works in the fields. Units messages and their intersections with polygons of the fields give us an idea of works performed in the fields. The same as for drivers, there are no separate units list in the application. This is due to the fact that the system uses the units that are available to the current user, and we do not perform any changes to the units in the applications. If you need to change the name of the unit and configure, for example, the fuel calculation, you need to go to Wialon interface, and you can do it there. The same as with the drivers, if you want to see what units are available for Hecterra, you can go to the Reports tab and select the report type by unit, and after that you will be able to see the list of all the units that are available to this user. So please pay attention that the access rights are very important here. To be able to request and register the candidates, you should have a right to the messages and reports for these units. Okay, now we can go to the cultivations part. Now our account is set up and we have fields. We have crops lists. We have operations list. We have implements list. All the implements have the working weeds indicated for each of them. We have units with messages. We have drivers that are assigned to the units. And now we can proceed to detecting and registering the cultivations for our fields. So a cultivation is the work performed in a field by the machinery. The most crucial information is who and what participated in the cultivation, when it happened, and how much area was covered. So to launch a search for potential cultivations, we go to the register page. We select the date and the unit. We can select 1 unit or even more. Up to 10 units can be selected. So you can select several units. So let's start with 1. And we click on the search button. Okay, as a result, we will see the table of potential cultivations, the cultivations that the system has found, but the user has not registered them yet. So we may open the cultivation properties, and we will see the full detailed information on a separate page, and we can make a decision to approve or to decline the cultivation. We can also add all the missing data. For example, if we don't have any driver's name, or if the trailer was not detected automatically, or if we want to change something. We can add several drivers to one cultivation. We can change or assign the implement that was performing this operation. We can change the operation, and we can even change the width of the implement. If we change something, we need to recalculate the area, and after the recalculation is done, we will see this information. And we need to understand what requirements are to be met for the track became a cultivation. The minimum time spent on the field is 1 minute, and the length of the track in the field must be more than 80% of the perimeter of the field. So in this case, if these requirements are met, the track can be registered as a cultivation. So we see that it is a potential cultivation. Let's see what other information about the cultivation is available here. So we see the cultivated area. So this is the area of the field cultivated by the unit. So the length of the track inside the field is multiplied by the implement's width, and that is how the cultivate area is received. We also see the overlaps. This is the area of the field sections which the unit visited more than once. So if you would like to see this information on the map, you need to activate this layer on the map, and you will see all the overlaps. Next one, the next characteristics, emissions. So emissions, this is the total area of the sections which the unit did not visit. So this may be the blank spaces between the sections of the cultivation, or sections that are close to the edge of the field. We can also see these areas on the map, and if this area is less than 1 hectare, it can be an emission. So if this area exceeds a hectare, the system will include it to the remaining area, or the area left. So that is, it will be assumed that this part of the field can still be cultivated another time, or by other means of transport, by other implement. Coming back to this last point, the area left is the area of the field that has not been cultivated. So the cultivated area, the overlappings and emissions, as well as the track of the movement of the unit are shown on the map, and all these layers can be turned off or on if you need them. This visual processing information is stored in the system for 11 months after the processing date. 11 months later, you will see just some general information about the cultivation in the report. You will be able to see the field on the map, but you will not be able to see the overlaps, the emissions, and the cultivated area the way it is shown right now. Moreover, if the units have fuel sensors, the information about the fuel volume spent on this cultivation will also be available in the cultivation description right here. We also pay your attention to the access rights. So if the user doesn't have rights for messages and reports from the unit, the search for candidates, potential cultivations will not be possible. Right now we have viewed all the cultivation properties. We have added some additional drivers. We have changed the implements reads. We have recalculated the areas according to the changes we made. And right now we can approve this cultivation, and after these, we will be able to see this information in the report. So let's go to the reports tab. And let's see that the last cultivation is the one we have just registered. It contains 3 drivers. The operation is different, and the cultivated area is also different because we modified this cultivation. So if you happen to find some mistake and if you want to correct something, so you need to go to the reports. You can click on the cultivation you would like to correct. You open the cultivation properties and you just delete this cultivation. You delete it, and after that you need to find this cultivation once again, correct the details that were wrong, and you will be able to register it once again. So let's see how it works. Here we are. We open the cultivation properties, and if we need to modify something, we can do it right here. And after everything is checked, we can approve the cultivation, and it will be stored in the application database, and it can be viewed in the report for 5 years. So the history period for the reports in Hecterra will be 5 years, and you will be able to view this information. I believe that's all for today. We have covered the functionality of the application, what elements are to be created in Wialon, what elements are to be created in Hecterra, how to register the cultivations, what characteristics each of the cultivations include. I would like to pay your attention to the documentation we have for this application. If you go to the user settings, you will be able to switch to the documentation with the detailed description of all the application functionality. And another important place where we invite you is the application discussion on the forum. So this is the place where you can ask your questions if you have any, where you can propose your ideas about the application, and you can see if there are any changes or if any new features are introduced into the application. So we invite you to join this discussion, and we will be happy to receive your ideas, and you can share your experience of working with the application with us and with the rest of the users. So that's all for today. I stop the webinar recording.